everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and I'm happy to be with you here on a Thursday morning. If you missed Real Hawk Talk last night, you should go and check it out. Stacey Rost, Evan Hill, Dana O'Gorman, and I all hung out last night. We talked about all sorts of stuff, some of it related to football, some of it not. So if you need a little break from all just the pure football talk, we had some fun yesterday, and you should check that out. Good time with Stacy as always. Today's a special episode though, because I do this once a year ahead of the draft where I go through and lay bare the reality of what John Schneider does in the draft and what he does not do. And there's a lot of kind of casual conversation out there about, hey, let's just this is what John Schneider does. This is the truth about what he does that I kind of see and sometimes challenge, but we're going to talk about the reality, and some of it is going to be different than what you would expect. We're also going to talk about this in a way where I'm going to tell you the good and I'm going to tell you the bad. These are going to be facts. These aren't going to be, I'm going to tell you some of my analysis as well. But the goal here is to give you the facts and let you kind of make some assessment about what you think of that information. Now, I had planned to do this show yesterday, and I was going to give you a bunch of visuals. I tried to start this morning doing more visuals, and you know what? I just realized it wasn't worth it. You're going to get to stare at my face. I might show you some stuff in a spreadsheet here now and then, but I'm going to talk you through a lot of these things. We're going to have a little bit of fun too. We're going to play some guessing games along the way. No prizes, unfortunately, other than bragging rights. So you will know if you are right, and feel free to join in chat over here on YouTube. Make sure if you're watching on Twitter, head over to YouTube. It's the best place to watch the show, and that's where you can participate in live chat. Just a much better experience overall. So I will give you some opportunities, some quizzes, some guessing games along the way, and we'll see how many of you actually know your general manager and his tendencies. So some of the things we're going to talk about are, how often does John Schneider trade up? How often does he trade back? Who are some of the players that he passed on by trading? We'll talk about some of those things. We'll talk about what rounds he takes those actions in, what rounds he doesn't. We'll talk about what kinds of positions he trades for and what kind of positions he doesn't. We'll talk about what positions he's picked the most in the draft, which positions has he picked the least, what tendencies have changed in recent years, what tendencies haven't. So we've got a lot to cover. I'm not going to take much more time as the preamble, but excited to share all this with you. And if you wouldn't mind, take one moment to give the show a like, click subscribe. We are charging towards 18,000 subscribers on the channel. Would love to get there. So we are going to have a bunch of fun in a couple of weeks when the draft hits. I'll be live from the VMAC. Evan Hill, Jeff Simmons, Nathan Ernst, Derek Gebby, who knows who else, will be on live stream either the whole time or various times. We will be with you pick by pick by pick for pretty much the entire draft. I will be able to step away at times to participate in conference calls with the draft picks, ask them questions, and then I'll come back on the stream. We're going to have a wonderful time hanging out, talking about all of it in real time. So make sure you've got your time set aside to hang out with us on draft day, draft 3 days, as a matter of fact, as we go through the NFL draft in a few weeks. And the Seahawks, with 5 picks in the top 92, are going to remake this roster in a way that will either be a day to remember or a day to forget, and we won't know until we get there, and we won't really know until practices start. So lots of good stuff coming. Make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you click the bell to get notified when I go live so you don't miss a single thing. Okay, are you ready? Are you ready? I think you're ready. we've got a few folks in here. Good morning to the folks that are joining here early. First question of the morning. We're going to start off, I think, relatively easy. Of all the positions that the Seahawks, that John Schneider has taken over the years, what is the position that he has taken most often, and what position has he taken least often? And I'm going to tell you the position options because there's various ways you could look at this. For example, I do not call offensive line one position. I break out offensive tackle versus guard versus center, quarterback, tight end, running back, wide receiver, cornerback, safety, linebacker. And for linebacker, I'm talking about off-ball linebackers, edge rushers. Okay, this could be outside linebackers or it could be defensive ends, depending on what position, what kind of defense they were running over the years. And then defensive tackle. Okay, those are your options. So which is the position that he has taken most, and which is the position that he has taken least? I think the position that he's taken the least is probably the easiest one to guess, but I'm curious. I'm going to check in with chat here. We've got people, well, we're not talking about long snappers and punters and kickers, so those will be off the board. I think we've got a guess that the most he's taken is cornerback and the least is center. We've got somebody saying that wide receiver is most. We've got someone saying quarterback is the least. Another vote for quarterback. All right. We got a lot to cover, so I'm going to reveal the correct answers there. The most common position that John Schneider has taken is cornerback. Cornerback. He has taken how many cornerbacks? 18 cornerbacks. 18 cornerbacks in his tenure. What has he taken the least? Quarterback. So those who guessed cornerback as most and quarterback as least, you are correct. He's only taken 2 quarterbacks in his time with the Seahawks dating back to 2010. But there's a pretty close second for what he has taken the most. And some of you guessed that as well. The second most common position that John Schneider takes in the draft is wide receiver. Interesting that those two positions face off against one another. And I'm going to take a break from the most common positions. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's look at those 3 positions: cornerback, quarterback, and wide receiver in terms of who he's drafted and how he's done at those positions. So let's start with the most common, cornerback. And I'm going to read you the list of every cornerback John Schneider has taken in his tenure. And I'm going to go from early first round to 7th round, okay? So it'll be in order there. He's taken Devin Witherspoon, Shaquille Griffin, Kobe Bryant, who now is a safety, but he was drafted as a corner, so that's how I'm counting him as a corner. Trey Brown, Ugo Amadi, Walter Thurmond, Nehemiah Pritchett, Reek Woolen, Trey Flowers, Ty Smith, Thorold Simon, a guy named Richard Sherman, DJ James, Mike Tyson, Eric Pinkins, Jeremy Lane, Byron Maxwell, and Ryan Murphy. Okay. Out of that list of 18 players drafted across all 7 rounds, although he has never taken a cornerback in the second round. He's taken one in every other round other than the second round. I would say that Witherspoon, Griffin, Thurmond, Woolen, Sherman, Jeremy Lane, and Byron Maxwell all worked out to be pretty good picks. And you could say Kobe Bryant, although he didn't work out to be a cornerback. So a little bit different. So I'd say a decent hit rate on the cornerback position. And one of the things to note here about cornerback is that of the guys I mentioned that were hits, Walter Thurmond, Reek Woolen, Richard Sherman, Jeremy Lane, and Byron Maxwell were all drafted in the 4th round or later, all day 3 picks. Now, we don't know how much of that might have been Pete Carroll influence, how much of that is John Schneider. But those are the facts. Those are the realities, that he has hit on a number of day 3 cornerbacks over the years. We'll find out. I don't believe he did it again with Nehemiah Pritchett based on what I've seen, but we will find out. DJ James already washed out. So interesting tendencies there, and where he has taken his cornerbacks over the years. Only 2 players have been drafted on day 1 or day 2. Before 2023, he had never taken a cornerback ahead of the 3rd round. And ahead of 2017, he had never taken a cornerback before the 4th round. So in general, John Schneider has looked to take cornerbacks later in the draft. Something to keep in mind. Now, he did use the 5th overall pick, his highest pick ever, on that position. So he has broken a tendency a little bit there. And players will speak to you on the board. So this does not mean that he will never take another cornerback early. But historically, the bulk of his cornerback picks have been on day 3. Now, quarterback is a fascinating one. We've talked about this a bunch. We won't spend a bunch of time on it here. He's only taken 2. He has never taken a quarterback before the 3rd round. Russell Wilson, the famous 3rd round pick, and Alex Magoo, the less famous 7th round pick. Now, he's batting 50%, 500. Not bad in terms of hit rate. But he has not gone to the well here very often, and he has not ever gone day 1. And when he's gone day 2, it's been late day 2. And remember, day 1 is round 1, day 2 is rounds 2 and 3. So you've got a GM who I know would love to shake this habit of not taking rookie quarterbacks. You've got Jalen Milroe, who's been linked making a visit to the Seahawks. That will have been at least his second meeting with the team, as he met with them at the Senior Bowl, as all guys do at the Senior Bowl. And Jalen Milroe's been invited to the draft, which means he's almost certain to go either in the 1st or the 2nd round. If the Seahawks decide to take him, that would be the first time in John Schneider's history that he would have taken a quarterback in rounds 1 or 2. Wide receiver is interesting, and we're going to talk about this right now. So that's the 2nd most common position, and a lot of you guess wide receiver is the most common. So you're close. And before last year, when he drafted Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James, you would have been right that it was the most common position that he had drafted. When I did the show last year, I'm pretty sure that was the most common. But now it's the 2nd most common. And I'm going to read you the names, as I did before, with who he's drafted at the receiver position. All right? So again, from earliest to latest in terms of, or earliest round to latest round. Jackson Smith and Jigba, D. Eskridge, DK Metcalf, Paul Richardson, Golden Tate, Amara Darboh, Tyler Lockett, Gary Jennings Jr., Kevin Norwood, Chris Harper, Chris Durham, Freddie Swain, Bo Melton, Derek Young, John Ursua, David Moore, Kenny Lawler. Did you notice anything as I read those names? Unlike the cornerback position, you don't have a lot of day 3 goodness happening with wide receiver. The earlier the pick that John Schneider uses on a wide receiver, the more likely it is that that player is going to be good. And he's drafted some very good wide receivers. And by the way, this dates back to his time in Green Bay, where he had a pretty good record in helping with wide receivers. So when you look at his receivers taken in the first 2 rounds, you've got JSN, D. Eskridge, DK Metcalf, Paul Richardson, Golden Tate. Pretty much every one of those receivers was a hit other than D. Eskridge. 4 out of 5. And you could debate how good was Paul Richardson. He was pretty good. He wasn't great, but he was a legitimate starting receiver. JSN, DK Metcalf, and Golden Tate are legitimate upper echelon receivers. So he's done pretty well. And then you got Tyler Lockett in the 3rd round, who is one of the franchise's best players ever. So receiver's been a pretty good position for John Schneider in terms of finding top shelf talent. But when he drafts them later, not so much. I mean, that is an empty list. The best player that he's drafted after day 2, so this is rounds 4 through 7, is David Moore. So wide receiver is a position he's taken a lot. He's hit a lot early. He's missed almost all of them late. So wide receiver, the 2nd most common position, and I would say a pretty successful one overall. Now, the other thing to know about receiver is of the 17 receivers that he has taken, 7 of them are in the first 3 rounds. Compare that to cornerback, where he's taken 18, and only 2 were taken in the first 3 rounds. So he's much more likely to take receivers early, and when he does, he usually hits. All right, let's keep going. If cornerback and wide receiver are the 2 most common positions taken by the Seahawks, by John Schneider, what is the next most common? I'll give you the next 2 most common. All right? And they're pretty closely related. Who do you what positions do you think after wide receiver off the board are wide receiver, cornerback, and quarterback? Those are off the board. So what's if he's taken 18 corners, 17 receivers, what's the next most common position that John Schneider's drafted? We have a guest here of defensive line and edge, running back and defensive line, running back, Now keep in mind, defensive line, the person who said defensive line and edge has got the right idea. Remember, defensive tackle and edge are separated out here. We got guard, tight end, edge. Another guess for edge and defensive tackle. Well, we've got a couple folks that have nailed it. The next most common position that John Schneider has drafted is edge rusher with 16. And after that, defensive tackle with 13. So these are actually the 4 positions that he's taken with 10% or more of his total picks over the years. We've now covered them all. Defensive tackle, defensive end or edge, wide receiver, and cornerback represent 50%, 50% of John Schneider's picks throughout his career in Seattle have fit into one of those 4 buckets: defensive tackle, edge, wide receiver, or cornerback. All right? But let's talk about how he's done at those positions. Let's start with edge, which is the next most common, as I said, with 16 players taken. Now again, I'll read off to you who he's taken at that position group. This is edge rushers. And this is from earliest to latest. L.J. Collier, Bruce Irvin, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor, Frank Clark, Cassius Marsh, E.J. Wilson, Mike Morris, Tyreek Smith, Alton Robinson, Jacob Martin, Obum Gwancham, Ty Powell, Greg Scruggs, and Dexter Davis. Now, that's an interesting eclectic group you've got there from Mr. Schneider. And the first name I read off, not a great one, in L.J. Collier. Now, the Cardinals re-signed him. They seem excited about him. Bruce Irvin was drafted to be an edge rusher, ended up really being more of a Sam backer, strong side backer, who was a great edge setter and an occasional pass rusher. Derek Hall and Boye Mafe could be 2 of his best edge rush picks of his career. They have more to develop, but they're off to pretty good starts. And they're both recent, which is interesting. Darrell Taylor, fascinating study. From a pure statistical perspective, on the sack count perspective, one of the more successful pass rushers that John Schneider has drafted, and one of the most productive pass rushers in his first few years that the Seahawks have ever drafted. Yes, it's true. Does not mean he was good, but he was a confusing player in that he did pile up quite a few sacks early in his career, but he had a lot of other problems. And those sacks came in bunches. And then there was long droughts. Frank Clark, clearly a very successful pick as an edge rusher. I would say his most successful pick as an edge rusher was Frank Clark. Cassius Marsh had a fine career for the Seahawks, played some meaningful moments. Alton Robinson was a confusing player who looked like he was going to blossom into something and then turned into nothing. Jacob Martin, who still is bouncing around and who I thought was very promising. Greg Scruggs, a forgotten name for some on those LOB teams, played a lot of different snaps for them and I thought was pretty good. So as we go through this list, I think it's kind of polka dotted with some good, some bad, and it's all throughout day 1, day 2, and day 3. You've got the E.J. Wilsons and the Obum Gwanchams. But you've also got some quality in Greg Scruggs in the 7th round, some quality from Jacob Martin in the 6th. You got some good play from Alton Robinson in the 5th round. We don't know yet. Mike Morris is looking like he's not going to be the player you'd hope he'd be, but who knows? Recently, a newlywed. Maybe he's got new life. Maybe he'll come back a changed player. But if you look over the first 2 rounds where he is drafted 6 of the 16 players that he has taken at edge have been in the first 2 rounds. You've got LJ Collier, Bruce Irvin, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor, and Frank Clark. I would say that 5 of those 6 have worked out pretty well. Now, you can debate Darrell Taylor. That's fine. But if you look at his numbers, he's not a pure bust. He just isn't. LJ Collier, pretty much a bust. So this is similar to wide receiver, where John Schneider takes a lot of this position, and he will take this position early. He's taken 2 in the first round. He's taken 4 in the second round. And by the way, his track record in the second round, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor, Frank Clark, kind of say he's batting 100, batting 1,000 is, I think, the more appropriate baseball term. So this position group, again, one to watch. Now, he took an edge rusher in back-to-back years in the second round in Derek Hall and Boye Mafe. That worked out pretty well, at least so far. This is an interesting one. Defensive tackle. Again, this is the 4th most common position drafted by John Schneider. He's taken 13 of these players over the years. And I will read them again to you. Byron Murphy, Malik McDowell, Jaron Reed, Rasheem Green, Nazir Jones, Jordan Hill, Cam Young, Jay Howard, Jesse Williams, Quentin Jefferson, Jimmy Staten, DeMarcus Christmas, and Pep Levingston. Now, that's also an interesting mix. Byron Murphy, his first round pick spent on that position was just last year. I believe that's going to be a great pick. It was not proven to be in year 1, at least by conventional statistics. But if you go back and you watch my show on Byron Murphy's rookie year, I think you'll see that he had a pretty damn good rookie year. And I think there's a lot of reasons to believe he will be even better going forward. So I see someone says that, I sound extremely caffeinated at 2x speed. That's funny. I think a lot of people might listen to this show at faster speeds because I'm a little deliberate in my delivery. But you should know I don't drink coffee. I don't do caffeine really at all. And it's not because I have something against caffeine. I just have never really needed it. All right, so we look at this. Byron Murphy, their first round pick at the defensive tackle position. Malik McDowell, absolute disaster. We'll never know if it was the player or not, if he was going to be a good player or not. It's kind of got an asterisk by it. It's obviously one of the worst picks of John Schneider's career because of how it turned out, but we won't ever really know about the scouting of the player because of what happened. Jaron Reed, very good second round pick. Rasheem Green, mixed bag, not great in the 3rd round. Nazir Jones, one of the weirdest career trajectories you'll find. Looked like a potential star early on and then just disappeared. Jordan Hill, another forgotten name from the Super Bowl years of LOB. A very productive rotational interior rusher for those teams. Rarely mentioned, but a very good player for a 3rd round pick. Cam Young, not so great so far in the 4th round. Jay Howard was a really good 4th round pick. The Seahawks were so stacked back then at the defensive tackle position, he didn't make the team and went on to play productive years for the Kansas City Chiefs. Jesse Williams didn't end up working out from Australia because I think of some physical issues, which was a shame. Quentin Jefferson, very good 5th-round pick, still kicking around the league. And then the last 3, Jimmy Staten, DeMarcus Christmas, Pep Livingston, not so much. But there's been some pretty decent quality for John Schneider throughout the rounds of the draft at the defensive tackle position. It's been, I'd say there's not a lot of just absolute busts, especially early on. It's a little surprising to me that this is the 4th most common position that he's drafted. Given the conversation around trenches, we talk about offensive line a lot. We haven't seen, like, a lot of these names. One of the things to note, these are all defensive tackles. If you want to look at nose tackles, that would be like Jesse Williams, Jimmy Staten. Those guys were drafted in the 5th round. Like, he has not drafted a lot of true, like, run stuffers at all. And when he has, Cam Young was a nose tackle drafted in the 4th round. Those guys are day 3 picks for him. He does not tend to take nose tackles ahead of day 3. So keep that in mind if you love an Alfred Collins or you love a Tyleik Williams or some of the other guys in this class. If they're primarily a run stuffer, it's unlikely John Schneider uses a pick before day 3, round 4, on a player like that. All right. Shall we keep going? Let's keep going. Before I get into the next most common positions, we're going to switch gears and talk about trading. Because Malik McDowell is famously part of some of the worst trades, draft day trades for John Schneider in terms of how they turned out. So we'll take a little bit of a detour and then we'll come back to the most common positions taken. But let's talk about Schneider's draft trade history. And the kind of the book on John Schneider is that he just trades back. He doesn't trade up. And if you look at all the draft day trades he's made, it is actually true, it's fact, that he has traded back much more than he has traded up. In fact, he has traded back 21 times. He has traded up 9 times. Possible I've missed something somewhere along the way, but I think these are relatively accurate. And actually, for what it's worth, I think that I missed a trade from last year when he traded back in the 4th round. So there's another trade back here at least that I'm missing from 2024. So that would make it 20. That'd make it 22 trade backs and 9 trade ups. But I think the part to kind of keep in mind is of the times when he's traded back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of those 22 times that he's traded back have been in the 1st round. Of the times that he's traded up, 0 have been in the 1st round. He has never traded up in the 1st round with the Seahawks. So folks that are like, hey, why don't we trade up and get an Armand Membu, or trade up and get the quarterback that you like, or trade up and do X, Y, or Z. He's never done that. Doesn't mean he won't, but he's never done that. When you look at the times that he does trade up, it's not that far after the first round. In fact, 3 of his 9 trade ups have been in the second round. And 5 of his 9 trade ups have been on day 2, which is second and third round. So even though on day 1 in the first round, he does not trade up ever so far, as soon as you get to day 2, John Schneider moves around the board much more often. Here are the 5 times that he traded up on day 2. In 2015, he traded up to the third round, pick 69, to draft Tyler Lockett. Not bad. In 2016, the next year, he traded up in the second round to draft Jarran Reed. In 2019, he traded up in the third round to draft Cody Barton. Again in 2019, he traded up in the second round to draft DK Metcalf. And in 2020, he traded up in the second round to draft Darrell Taylor. So when he's traded up on day 2, his hit rate's not bad. Darrell Taylor, DK Metcalf, Cody Barton, Jarran Reed, Tyler Lockett. So when he sees a guy that he likes on day 2 and he tries to go up and get them, he's had good luck. Have it on pretty good word that he tried to trade up in day 2 last year for Cooper Beebe in the third round, ended up with Christian Haynes because they couldn't trade up to get him, to get Cooper Beebe. We'll find out if that would have been a good pick. But that's a decent hit rate when he does trade up on day 2. His other trade up players over his career: Jesse Williams, we talked about him, the defensive tackle, traded up in round 5. Quentin Jefferson in 2016 was a trade up guy in round 5. Michael Dixon, the punter, was a trade up in round 5 guy. So pretty decent hit rate in trading up in the 5th round. And then Stone Forsythe was a trade up in the 6th round. So decent results in when he does trade up. John Schneider generally has done pretty well with who he's picked. On the trade backs, some of the guys that, let's talk about the round 1 trade backs. In 2012, he traded back from the 12th pick with the Eagles, ended up with the 15th pick, ended up taking Bruce Irvin. And 4 of the picks that he got for trading back, they got Bruce Irvin, Jay Howard, and Jeremy Lane. The Eagles took Fletcher Cox. I think Seahawks didn't exactly get the better end of that one. 2014, they traded back out of the first round, and the Vikings took Teddy Bridgewater. Also available, the Seahawks could have taken Joel Bitonio, Derek Carr, Marquise Lee, just to name a few. The Seahawks traded into the second round for pick 40. And they ended up getting Cassius Marsh with the 4th round pick that they added. They traded back again from that pick 40 that they got. What they ended up with was Cassius Marsh, Paul Richardson, and Kiero Small. for having made those trades. Now, you passed on Joel Bitonio, Derek Carr, Kyle Van Noy, LaMarcus Joyner. You passed on some pretty good players to make those moves. I'm not sure that they've done really well when they've traded back in terms of the players that they've passed on. 2017 is the worst of this, at least from my perspective. They traded back 3 times from the 26th pick to the 31st pick to the 34th pick, ended up with the 35th pick. And in doing so, they passed on Tre'Davious White, David Njoku, TJ Watt, Ryan Ramczyk, Cam Robinson. And who do they end up with? Lano Hill, Tedrick Thompson, Malik McDowell, Mike Tyson, and Chris Carson. Chris Carson certainly was great, but man, you passed on some foundational players in that draft by trading back. I just don't think the trade backs have worked out very well for the Seahawks. Here's another example. 2018, they traded back from the 18th pick to the 27th pick. And the Packers took Jaire Alexander. The Seahawks ended up with Rashad Penny and Jacob Martin. By moving out of that spot, they passed on Leighton Vander Esch, Frank Ragnow, Billy Price, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst. These are foundational players that you're missing on by trading back from, in this case, 18 to 27, which, by the way, is kind of what we're talking about here quite a bit in this year's draft. Let's go to the other first round pick trade backs. 2019, moved from pick 30. Actually, they started at pick 21, and then they moved to pick 30, and then they traded back again to pick 37. So they moved out of the first round entirely. And what did they get for doing that? They got Ugo Amadi, Ben Burkervin, Marquise Blair, Gary Jennings, Travis Homer. All right. And who did they pass on? Hollywood Brown, Montez Sweat, Josh Jacobs, Caleb McGarry, Byron Murphy, the cornerback, Deebo Samuel, Dalton Risner, Elgton Jenkins, the offensive lineman. These are very good players that they're passing on, and they're ending up with not as good players. So I think when John Schneider is traded back in the first round, it's hard to argue that any of those have been good. Like, I don't know that I'd call any of those a success. And when I look back, I'm looking at all the players the Seahawks have taken with their trade backs at any round. Maybe the most successful was in 2012 when they traded back from the 43rd pick in the second round to the 47th pick in the second round. 47th pick, yeah. And this was when Michael Kendricks and Bobby Wagner were both available. They wanted an inside backer, and they were probably happy with either one. My understanding is they actually wanted Michael Kendricks. By trading back, they lost their chance to choose Kendricks because he went to Philadelphia, and they ended up with Bobby Wagner. So it worked out because it probably took away their top choice, who ended up being not as good of a player. And they also added Corey Toomer and Greg Scruggs. So that's a successful move back. But it's also a little bit lucky. I look at every other trade back and I'm like, these are the guys you... Maybe this one, maybe. So 2023, in round 3, they had pick 83, and they traded with the Broncos. They moved back, to the 4th round. They moved back a full round, and they got a 2024 third round pick. What they got for moving back was Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes. Debatable how those are going to turn out. Riley Moss was the pick in the 3rd round. So I think I would be okay with that trade. But here's some of the guys they passed on. Trenton Simpson, the linebacker, Jair Brown, Kobe Turner, Dorian Williams, Jordan Battle. Like, would they have been better off with Kobe Turner in 2023 than Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes? Yeah, I think they pretty clearly would have. Now, it doesn't mean that's who they would have taken, but there's at least a little bit of, okay, maybe that made a little bit of sense. Here's one that actually worked out for them. They traded in 2020. They traded back from the 64th pick in the 2nd round to the 3rd round and got a 5th round pick. So they got pick 69. They moved back 5 spots and they picked up a 5th round pick. They ended up with Damian Lewis and Alton Robinson. And they passed on Jeremy Chin, who's a good player, but I think that that's probably a win overall. But I'm just telling you guys, I'm looking through these trade backs. It's not good. It's not good. So I don't think trading back, despite the fact that all of the nerds will tell you that's the best thing to do is to trade back, get more picks, and that it's a crapshoot. At least for John Schneider, that has not helped so far. I would say that it has been some of his worst moves have been when he's traded back. So as someone who's been advocating for a trade out of 18, I got to rethink that a little bit. Sticking and picking might be the play. Let's keep going on most common positions taken. All right. So we've done cornerback is the most common, receivers next, edge rushers the 3rd, and then defensive tackle. After that, we have got a 3-way tie for the next most common position taken. Which positions do you think are the next 3? After cornerback, after defensive tackle, after edge, after wide receiver, what are the next 3 most common? I'll give you a hint. Remember that offensive line I'd break out as separate positions. So it's not just O-line, it is separate positions. For what it's worth, I'll give you 2 more seconds to guess. If I combined all offensive line picks as one, offensive tackles, guards, centers, that would by far be the most common position taken. 28 picks have been offensive linemen. It's a massive number. Keep in mind, cornerback at 18 is the one that's been most common. So I'm breaking it out as separate positions because I think just like edge and defensive tackle are different, offensive tackle, center, and guard are different positions. All right? But he's taken 28 offensive linemen. So the next 3 tied for the next 3 most common. Offensive tackle, guard, and running back have all been taken 12 times by John Schneider during his career with the Seahawks. So let's talk about those positions. We'll start with offensive tackle. And I'll tell you again, I'll just read them to you and then you can decide. But I have some thoughts about offensive tackle. Of the 12 guys taken, again, from earliest to latest, Charles Cross, Jermaine Ifedi, James Carpenter was drafted as a tackle. That's why I've got him as a tackle, even though he became a guard. Russell Okung, Justin Britt, also drafted as a tackle, ended up as a guard, and then finally a center. But he was drafted as a tackle. Right tackle's where he started. Abe Lucas, Jamarco Jones, Mike Jarrell, Stone Forsythe, Justin Sr., Garrett Scott, Michael Bowie. Baba Bowie. So 12 players. And of those 12, 4 were taken in the first round. 5 were taken in the first 2 rounds. 6, half of them were taken on day 1 or day 2. So when John Schneider takes tackles, generally speaking, it's very early. And I'll give you another bit of trivia. The position that John Schneider has spent the most first-round picks on in his career is offensive tackle, with 4. He spent 4 first-round picks on offensive tackles. That's Charles Cross, Jermaine Ifedi, James Carpenter, and Russell Okung, his first ever pick. And I don't know, for my money, people say John Schneider's been bad at drafting offensive linemen. That is a lazy way to describe it. If you talk about the offensive tackles, it's a pretty good list. Charles Cross, Russell Okung, Abe Lucas, those are good players. And while James Carpenter and Justin Britt did not work out as tackles, they became pretty good offensive linemen. So they're not busts either. They're pretty good players. Now, Jermaine Ifedi, some people might argue he turned out okay. I think he's pretty bad. I think Abe Lucas could end up being one of his best picks. We'll see how that turns out. His day 3 picks, rounds 4 through 7, I mean. Jamarco Jones, Mike Jarrell, Stone Forsythe, Justin Sr., Garrett Scott, Michael Bowie. Not so much success there. Although we'll see with Mike Jarrell. Promising athlete, hard worker. Okay, so that's his 12 tackles. Now let's talk about his 12 guards. You've got Christian Haynes, Damian Lewis, Reese Odiombo, John Moffitt, Anthony Bradford, Phil Haynes, Terry Poole, Mark Glowinski, Satawa Lamea, Ryan Seymour, Jared Smith, and J.R. Sweezy. And of those 12 picks, how many of them have been spent on day 1? 0. He has never drafted a guard in round 1. How many of them have been drafted in the second round? 0. He has spent 0 first or second round picks on the guard position. What are we all mocking to the Seahawks in the first round and at pick 50 or 52? Guards. If he does either of those things, it will be the earliest draft pick he will have ever spent on a guard. Keep that in mind. Christian Haynes, Damian Lewis, Reese Odiombo, John Moffitt, all third-round picks. That's the earliest he has spent a draft pick on a guard. I would argue, look at the results. You get what you pay for. Now, there's some interesting results in this, in that Damian Lewis, not a bad third-round pick. Phil Haynes had some moments as a fourth-round pick. Mark Glowinski became a decent player. J.R. Sweezy was a Super Bowl starter and a high-priced free agent as a seventh-round pick. And I'm sure John Schneider looks at J.R. Sweezy and says, see, that's what developing an offensive lineman looks like. I just don't know that that's as easy to do as you want it to be. So I see a lot of just mediocre players. There's not a single one of those players that is a Pro Bowl quality player. And so if you look at the average position drafted, the average position drafted, the average round, guard is toward the bottom. Average draft position is 4.6 of the rounds. So almost the average position is a 5th round pick. Interestingly, cornerback is the same, which we talked about. He's hit on a number of later cornerbacks. Now, that's guard and tackle. The next most common I told you was, or the tied for that, is running back. Also 12 players. Let's go through that list. Rashad Penny, Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker, Kristen Michael, CJ Prosise, DJ Dallas, Robert Turbin, Alex Collins, Travis Homer, Kenny McIntosh, Chris Carson, Kiro Small. Is that John Schneider's best position? Let me read that again. Rashad Penny, Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker, Kristen Michael, CJ Prosise, DJ Dallas, Robert Turbin, Alex Collins, Travis Homer, Kenny McIntosh, Chris Carson, Kiro Small. And Kiro Small was a fullback, but I didn't break that out separately. That is a pretty damn good hit rate. Now, CJ Prosise had injury issues. Kristen Michael never fully realized all of that. You throw in some of the undrafted free agents, which I don't include in these, but like Thomas Rawls was also a pretty big success for a while. There's not a lot of busts in that group. You've got value. Even Travis Homer, who we joke about at times, you got value out of him as a 6th round pick. Chris Carson was a great 7th round pick. And Kenny McIntosh may turn out to be a great or a good 7th round pick. John Schneider has spent 1 1st round pick on running backs. He has spent 3 2nd round picks and 1 3rd round pick. So 5 of the 12 have been day 1 or day 2 picks. Compare that to the guard position where 0 have been day 1 or day 2. Day 1 or round 2 picks. I think that if you look at the average round drafted for running back, it's 4.2, so a little bit higher than guard. But he's done a pretty decent job with the running back position. As far as quality across the board, wherever he's taken a running back, he's done pretty well, which I think also helps make the argument that you should really think about whether or not you should be drafting running backs early. Do you really need to spend your early draft capital on that position? I'm not sure you do. All right, let's keep pressing forward. So those are the next 3 most commonly taken. After that, we're getting down to it. The next is linebacker, off-ball linebacker. After that, it's safety and tight end. All right? So let's talk about linebacker. Linebacker, this again, off-ball linebacker, taken 10 of these players in his career. Those players from earliest to latest: Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, Cody Barton, Tyrese Knight, Kevin Pierre-Louis, KJ Wright, Ben Burke-Hervin, Shaquem Griffin, Corey Toomer, and Malcolm Smith. Not a bad list, guys. Maybe in the running for other best position in terms of hit rate. Brooks, Wagner were the only pick. Brooks is the only 1st round pick he's ever spent on an inside backer. Wagner, the only 2nd round pick. Barton is the only 3rd round pick. Every other linebacker was 4th round or later. And of those later picks, Tyrese Knight, KJ Wright, Malcolm Smith, all played meaningful and productive snaps for you. So, not a bad list of backers. it is worth saying that of the players he's taken on day one and round two, Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner, pretty good list of guys. So that's the linebacker position. He's taken the average round. Linebacker is one of the earliest average rounds. He averages using a 4th round pick on a linebacker. Keep in mind, as I said, guard is 4.6, linebacker 4.0. Oops. I found a mistake in my chart. Aha. All right, I'm going to go back and redo a few things. It's okay. No harm, no foul here. Just make sure I've got the right numbers. Cornerback is even later than I thought. Okay, not that big of a deal. It was only cornerback that was off. So cornerbacks actually 4.8 is their average round selected. Linebacker is 4.0. If you're curious, the earliest average round selected is offensive tackle and defensive tackle. They're 3.8. All right, so that was linebacker. The other two are safety and tight end. So they're after linebacker. Safety. Earl Thomas, Marquise Blair, Lano Hill, Tedrick Thompson, Mark Legree, Cam Chancellor, Jarek Reed, and Winston Guy. Now you can add Kobe Bryant, but he was not drafted as a safety. He was drafted as a corner, so I've got him listed as a corner. Some really high highs at the safety position and some really low lows. Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Hall of Fame level players. Then there's just some guys. Marquise Blair, a 2nd round pick, bust. Lano Hill, 3rd round pick, bust. Mark Legree, 5th round pick. I don't really call 5th round picks busts, but he didn't do anything. Jarek Reed, I like Jarek Reed. We'll see about Jarek Reed as a 6th round pick. Winston Guy, 6th round pick, didn't really do much. So safety has been a tough position, and a position that you'd kind of think the Seahawks would have spent a little bit more on, but because Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor were fixtures for so long, they didn't. And then they went and they traded for Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. And so they just haven't invested in the safety position in the draft very much. I think this is a year to change that. I think there's some really interesting safety prospects, and I think the Seahawks have room to add to that room. Yes, I said room to add to the room because it's true. So safety is an interesting one, and not one that they've had a lot of success with since 2010. The last time the Seahawks drafted a good safety, 2010. Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor came in the same draft. 1st round pick and a 5th round pick. All right. Tight end. Nick Vannett, AJ Barner, Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly, Luke Wilson, Anthony McCoy, Steven Sullivan, and Jamison Kantz. They have never spent a 1st round pick on a tight end. They have never spent a 2nd round pick on a tight end. Will that change this year? If Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland falls to them at 18, is that the guy in an offense where tight end is a key part of the game plan? Don't know. This is a tight end rich draft class. Taking a tight end in the 1st or 2nd round makes a lot of sense in this draft. Will John Schneider break a tendency here and do it for the first time in his career? When you look at these names, it's a lot of mediocre names. Like, not bad, but not great. I know there's some big AJ Barner fans, and I think he had a strong first season. I'm not sure that AJ Barner has done anything to make it clear that he is going to separate himself from Will Dissly or Anthony McCoy or Luke Wilson. So, or Colby Parkinson. Like, there's some decent players in that list, but there's not a star. There's not a Pro Bowler. And not one that's even really close. And this is a position that is tied for the lowest average round drafted. Average round drafted is a 5th round pick spent on the tight end spot. So we'll see. We'll see if there's a break of tendency there. There's reason for there to be this time, but I'm not sure there will be. Okay, so we've gone through so many. We are down to the final position. We've already done the least most commonly drafted, was quarterback. The second least most commonly picked position for John Schneider, probably not going to surprise you, it is center. And you can kind of debate even some of the designations I've got here. So Ethan Posick was drafted as a center. Now, he's a 5-position flex kind of guy, and they played him at every position before they played him at center. But that was his primary role coming out, and initially that was expected to be where he'd play. Took a few years, but I'm counting him as a center. Ethan Posick, Joey Hunt, Christian Sokoli, and Olu Oluwatimi. Now, they spent a 2nd-round pick on Posick. They spent a 5th-round pick on Oluwatimi. They spent 6th-round picks on Joey Hunt and Christian Sokoli. What you have there is 4 guys, none of them particularly good. Some might argue Posick is pretty good. Fine. I think he's okay. I don't think he is a Pro Bowl kind of guy. And the fact of the matter is the Seahawks just have not invested in that position. Now, keep in mind, Justin Britt became a center for a while. He started out as a tackle and then a guard and then ended up as a center and actually had a Pro Bowl alternate year as a center. He had a year. But for the most part, the Seahawks have not invested in the center position. And so when they have a guy like Jared Wilson in for a visit, that's of note. When they like Jalen Sundell as an undrafted free agent and Olu Oluwatimi, who's a 5th-round pick, we'll see how that turns out. But you know they've passed on some centers that I've liked quite a bit over the years, and that hasn't worked out well for them. So, again, the most common position taken, cornerback, then receiver, then edge rusher, right? Remember what I said, that defensive tackle, wide receiver, edge rusher, and cornerback make up 50% of John Schneider's total picks throughout his career. If you then add in offensive tackle, running back, and guard, you've got 80% of his picks. So 80% of his picks, wide receiver, edge rusher, running back, guard, cornerback, offensive tackle, defensive tackle. And if you, depending on how you want to play it, as I said, they've spent 28 of their picks on offensive line overall. They have spent 29 picks on defensive line, if you include edge and defensive tackle as defensive line. So when you talk about trenches, which I do, you have to also acknowledge that John Schneider has spent the vast amount of his draft capital on the defensive and offensive lines. I would argue that in a lot of those cases, you're talking about players on the edges and not in the interior of those lines. And I think it shows in the quality of the play on those interior sides of the line. When there's been trouble stopping the run, there has not been that elite run stuffer. John Schneider's been able to get away with that because he's found an Al Woods in free agency, or a Taba Rubin in free agency, or a Tony McDaniel, veteran run stuffing kind of guys. He has not been able to replicate that on the offensive line, the interior offensive line. So I think that is probably the place where we've talked about it a bunch of times, where you have to hope he's going to have changed his ways for things to change. A couple super chats here I'm going to get to. Before I do, make sure you give the show a like, click subscribe. Would appreciate that. Don Hester is gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Thank you so much, Don. Really appreciate that. These Hawk Blogger memberships are huge, really help me out, help other people out as well. So I love it when people gift these. Consider doing it yourself. And if you get one of these, either pay it forward and give them one to someone else, or upgrade to club level or higher, get access to the Discord channel, exclusive videos, other fun stuff. So really recommend it. And thanks to Don for gifting some. Jordan Farrell says, will you be doing a draft guesser game again this year? If it's too much work, then no worries. Loved all the draft content so far, as always. I think I'm going to do it again. I think it worked out to where I was able to manage it. There might be a way I can make it even a little bit easier on myself. But yeah, I'm going to try to do that again this year because I think people did enjoy that. All right. So if you are listening to this episode as opposed to watching, and you don't like listening to the ads that are on the podcast, all you got to do is sign up at patreon.com/hawkblogger. That will give you ad-free audio always. And the shows are put up at the same time, available at the same time. So go ahead, sign up at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Plus, you get access to the Discord channel. Plus, you get a chance to ask questions to the Real Hawk Talk crew every time we do a show. Great deal. Head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger to do that. And if you haven't lately, head over to JK Boots, use code HawkBlogger, gets you $75 off, the best boots you will ever own. And we give $15 every time someone uses code HawkBlogger to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation, which helps protect the Northwest forests from fire and helps protect Northwest forest firefighters as well. Say that 5 times fast. So it's a win-win. Get great boots. It's a local company, Washington, Spokane-based, family-owned. All boots are handmade. Like, it takes like 6 to 8 weeks to make your boots. It's amazing. $75 off. I think it's a crazy deal. Make sure you take advantage. Code HawkBlogger. All right, folks. With that, I hope that you learned something, and I hope you reference this episode when people tell you falsehoods about what is true and not true. I don't think it's true that John Schneider does not draft good offensive linemen. I think it's true that he doesn't draft good interior offensive linemen. I think he drafts pretty good tackles. I think that you now know the most common positions that he spends on. You now know when he trades up, it's generally worked out pretty well. He doesn't do it in the first round. He does it in the second round and the third round quite a bit. When he trades back, it's almost never worked out. Almost never worked out. So keep that in mind as you go through and as you hear some myths that are out there. Try to slay them. Let's keep the facts, and out in front and center. All right, folks, have a great rest of your day. I am Brian Nemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.